Hello, boys and girls, and welcome to the first Thing We're Doing series whatever about Kirby and the Rainbow Curse, the supposed wanted sequel for a beloved classic, Canvas Curse? This seems like a very odd juncture to be at, because Canvas Curse was a very bizarre game from the DS era, where HAL Laboratory decided to take a spin on the whole Kirby concept and kind of removed everything that made him famous in the first place. There was no copy abilities, there technically was no platforming, the mini-bosses that are sprinkled throughout a typical Kirby game were thrown out because we don't need the copy abilities, and they turned Kirby into a limbless ball that you have to drive around the map. It was a very peculiar game, and I'm sure it had its particular following, or fans, or whoever appreciated rolling Kirby around into stop posts throughout the entire game. It was definitely a weird one. It was a typical Kirby story where magical space wizard du jour just dropped down and then kind of screwed everything up, and Kirby had to go punch him in the face after getting killed 5 times, because the central problem with Canvas Curse was that everything had to be rolled around, pun intended, this limbless Kirby that you couldn't directly control, which was a huge problem considering it was a DS game. A DS game that is famous for its non-direct control of things, vague button inputs being misinterpreted, and just not split-second decision-making. So you can pretty much imagine how that ended up. The level design of Canvas Curse had to be completely supplanted and replaced so that something like this could even work properly, which led to these giant open spaces, like very little enemies, and just like huge amounts of spaces so that you could actually draw paths for Kirby to follow. And that was kind of the game. Like, it was nothing like Kirby had ever done before, and it was a very good reason, was because it didn't work like I think HAL intended, which is why I'm very confused why it ended up being a game in the first place that they wanted to produce, with their central IP. Now we come to the flip side of the coin. Why the hell did HAL in their infinite wisdom, after that happened, return 8 years later to make a sequel for the Wii U? We're talking like several levels deep of fucking weird here. And I will say that across the board, Rainbow Curse is definitely an improvement to the idea. I can see that they went back to the drawing board, kinda understood why it didn't work, and tried to fix some of it. The level design is pretty par for the course from Canvas Curse, which is a fucking weird thing to say, but you know, that's where we are. So they improved the level design, made it a bit more well-paced, they closed things down a little bit. There are still definitely giant rooms, but you still have, you know, hazards, more enemies were introduced, the levels just look inherently more interesting. We don't have the famous final Canvas Curse world, which made a couple of lists like way back in the day when people did like top 10 countdowns on YouTube, when that was the big thing. When they did like the creepiest unintentional levels, and that was definitely on the list. So the levels are improved, they definitely look a hell of a lot better than they did back on the old DS days, but considering this is a handheld to console transition, that was kinda gonna be a given no matter what the hell happened, unless HAL like fell down 3 flights of stairs and broke every bone in their body. That was always going to be what happened. And it seems like they actually have some better ideas rather than just, you know, the only challenge being draw this really obtuse path or avoid the insta-death crusher thing in slightly less time than you really need to do that. Because they got some chase things, they got some avoiding the insta-death kill switch. They got those level parts where you have to use momentum to get Kirby across these little places that they forbid you from drawing, so you have to throw Kirby a certain distance. I think a very interesting addition was that they did actually do the stop posts in this game. So you don't have to be constantly aware of your momentum and have to counter your own movement. It seems like this game is designed to be a lot more fluid with its movement, which is why, you know, you get that combination of smaller corridors and huge empty spaces, because that tends to work a little bit better with the idea that they were going with, which is just throwing Kirby in whatever direction the player is drawing. And hell, talk about a perfect pairing in the world of video games. The one thing that the Wii U had that it could be doing was its fucking touchpad, and rather than Star Fox Zero, which completely shit the bed, Rainbow Curse actually fucking used it. You actually have better control because you have a way bigger screen to work with, and again, the game isn't constantly yelling at you to get this done, or you're gonna die, or it's gonna fail, okay? You definitely get a smoother ride. We definitely get a less difficult journey, and I really appreciate that because the obtuseness of Canvas Curse was its hugest problem. I can definitely see a lot of the original's influence, and that's definitely something that we should have expected, because I guess the problem with making a platformer like this is that it's really hard to make it differentiate it completely entirely from the previous entry. It's going to look pretty similar because you kind of have to use a lot of the same ideas, because that's just how the design document that they went with is going to work. So that's a whole big thing. It's colorful, it's bright, well, obviously it's a game with rainbow in the title, so it had to look good. It's got that whole claymation style, not so much in the crafted world sense, but it definitely goes for it. It looks cute and it's endearing in its own particular way. But at the end of the day, Rainbow Curse is going to be ironically cursed by the limitations of its own existence. It's just not an interesting game. It's not an interesting platformer. Just because, again, at the very heart, inherently, it's just obtuse and kind of an odd deal to make. Not having direct control of your character in a platformer, it could probably work in a different sort of game that could really turn it into, I don't know, some sort of golf-style, high edge of your seat, well-paced, challenging sort of stuff, you know, turning you into like a very fast projectile, kind of like Sonic. I guess kind of like Sonic Pinball? Oh, we actually have those games already. Those already exist. So it seems like the idea of Rainbow Curse is just kind of DOA when you think about it. The boss fights are a mixed bag. We always have boss fights, but now they're kind of the focus of the game this time. There's like 5 of them. Whoa-ly-doo! Great job, Hal. You had 5 of them because Rainbow Curse was such a hard project to work on. I mean, it is a hard project to work on. This is a console game, so of course it's gonna be a little bit more time than your handheld thing, and game development is what it is. But, I mean, come on, guys. Like, this is content deficiency of the highest order. We get, you know, memorable guys like Claykin, Wispy Woods, who is like, I don't even think Kracko is in this game. That's fucking weird, right? Wispy Woods is in this game. I mean, you always have to have Wispy Woods because he's the Wiggler of the goddamn Kirby universe. But Kracko not being here is a very weird absence when you really get down to it. When this is a Nintendo branded game. And the replacements we have for him are the Claykin and Hoop Galoon, which is just the worst. He's a giant wheel with a face on him, and the whole thing is that his weak spot is constantly rotating, so you have to be on his particular side, which would be fine if Kirby could move at speed, because Hoop Galoon is just faster than he is, so you have to go in the other direction to have a better chance. But I guess I never really put 2 and 2 together now that you can see it on screen, as I'm showing you a clip of my ass getting handed to me by Hoop Galoon. Hoop Lagoon. Oh my god. He doesn't even have a body. He's barely a fucking design. Like, Jesus. I can't believe I got completely KO'd by this asshole. But if you thought that that was going to be a high time of fun, then let me introduce you to the final boss of the game. Glacia Dark Crafter. Dark Crafter, really? I mean, I'll make fun of the Squeak Squad any day, but at least the Squeak Squad was a fucking name that actually was interesting. The Dark Crafter. What was the name of that goddamn final boss at the end of Triple Deluxe? The Bee Queen thing. I mean, she had like a name like Valencia Claw or something like that. Tarantulas, or, well, that was her henchman, but still, those are names. The Dark Crafter, are you kidding me? This is the console entry. This is the fucking your one Kirby 64 that you always put out. It's like, seriously? The Wii U, ironic as it seems to say, deserves a little bit better than that, guys. Like an actual villain, maybe one that makes appearances and dialogues or does something on screen, you know, game story thing. Why does this game not have a fucking story? Like, it's literally just, hey Kirby, I'm a paintbrush person and my world's completely fucked, how about you help me out? And that's the whole fucking thing. I get really goddamn shitty about this because this is Nintendo, this is HAL Labs, they've been around the block for fucking ever. They can put a story in a fucking game that's not an RPG. I'm not asking for a fucking lot. How about like 4 scenes, maybe 3 speech bubbles, maybe something to make me feel like they're actually there, that they exist, that they're doing a thing that we should... Antagonism, you know? That's kind of the whole point of your fucking villain. And then we get to the villain themselves and it's a terrible fucking design. It's goddamn awful. Like, nondescript, I can't remember a fucking thing about the actual boss, but the thing I will remember is their second form, when they turn into a rainbow cloud with a face on it. And, like, eyeball hands, I think? I know at one point, like, part of their eyeball hands are part of their form. Eyeball hands, which could have looked cool if they weren't literally just eyeball hands. Maybe add some spikes, maybe make them really big, I don't know. Again, that's kind of the problem with the entire game in general, is that superficial, glossy look, surface deep. That's as interesting as the game gets. It's just, here's the gameplay, and that's it, and then go on your way. Like, no one's going to remember fucking Rainbow Curse. No one. It's a goddamn get it done in a day and then completely forget about it, which is, again, kind of odd for the Wii U entry. I think should be at least a little bit substantial, guys. You could make this something to make the console players proud that they bought it, you know, Nintendo seal of approval. Your names are on the fucking game. It can be fun, it can be well paced, it can be a little bit challenging at points, which is kind of nice way to say that it's mostly boring. I don't remember a fucking thing about this game. I've had to look over the footage like 3 goddamn times to actually make this fucking video. And I think I've made all the points that I really need to make about this game. It just seems like one of those games that Nintendo made or paid for at the time of their lives when they were getting into that point of just making boring ass games. Like they were just in their ways, stuck in this rut, and they had no intention of digging themselves out until, I don't know, Super Mario Odyssey? I know it's probably earlier than that, but that seems like the big blockbuster moment that finally broke Nintendo out of this quagmire of mediocrity. And they've been doing this shit off and on for fucking years. I think the 3DS period is probably gonna be maybe 2013, 2010. I would need to pull up a fucking timeline to really nail this down, but just games that came out, existed, bore the famous names that Nintendo relies on, and then just sat there squidged and then fucked off. Like, that's what this game is. It's just the Kirby game that happened to come out at 2014 or whatever. To top this review all off, we gotta get to the most important point, and that's that this game is inexcusably short. I cut out an hour where I just left the game idle because I was on a phone call or I was on a project that suddenly came up or my house started on fire. Whatever happened back in the day when I was actually playing this. And the time I actually ended up with, the total amount of actual gameplay that was done, didn't even clock in at 5 hours. I'm looking at the timeline right now. I don't even think it clocked more than 4.5 hours. This game is so absurdly short that it seems like a joke. And again, this game isn't fucking hard, so it's really just pared down to brass tacks. 4.5 hours is all the things that they could think of doing before the game actually ended. And I don't even know if that like includes the credits, but then again, even if it did, I think that would just pare it down to like 4 hours total in actual gameplay terms. And that's the whole thing. And that's blind. That's a first run. That kind of reminds me of Captain Toad's game, because I think Captain Toad's game actually came in like incredibly short too. Because it was just a quote-unquote chill game that sat there and you do these little childish puzzles and oh, you can get 100% to actually put some challenge on it. It's like, got no story. The villain's a giant fucking bird. Captain Toadette went away, kidnapped. I guess that's the plot. As much as I shit on Captain Toad, I fucking gave it like a 3 or 4 out of 10 because I fucking hated it so much. At least that game had more of a plot than fucking Rainbow Curse. Wow. At the end of the day, like, it's still a HAL Lab game and it's still relatively well put together. I don't know why the fuck they came back to this idea of Canvas Curse, because I can't imagine that there's a lot of nostalgic value. Like, the fans were screaming, make a Canvas Curse too, and they did. I think this might have been a time when HAL was like, let's make a really different game. And hey, you remember that weird-ass game that we made 8 years ago on the DS? Well, let's just make another one. Because that's what this game is. Canvas Curse's difficulty at least meant it didn't have this length problem. And this length problem is completely inexcusable because we are talking, for better or worse, this was the 7th gen... Actually, it was the 8th gen Nintendo system. It was the 8th gen. There are fucking expectations in Nintendo, and you completely flubbed it up with this 7-world, 2-level per and a boss. And a boss that includes every boss in the game getting doubled up and just copy-pasted later on in the game. There were literally like fucking... I did like videos on 6 bosses, 5 bosses, that was it. And that was me delving deep into like the mini bosses that no one should give a shit about, like Deep Sea and Mechacotta. Those were 30-second boss fights that shouldn't have been on the list, but it did because I quote-unquote have integrity. So, yeah, that was fucking Rainbow Curse. That was just, wow. I'm actually kind of surprised. If you can't tell, I'm recording this just off the top of my head. And I'm kind of amazed that it's this coherent, considering I have no notes. I've barely re-looked at the footage. And it came out like this. I'm just like, consistently like, I'm looking at it over again and I'm getting more disappointed as I'm going on. Like, I'm getting more pissed off as I'm thinking about it. Because I'm going back to that point where the thing I always think about when I'm looking at a game that is this disappointing is thinking back to when it originally came out. Because stuff like this originally comes out on a system at a release date, and it comes out at this thing that we call full price. This game at one point was at full price, and it probably was $60 because at that point in the history, every game, price was standardized to that point value because, I don't know, coercion, just mutual benefit, whatever the case is. At some point, Kirby and the Rainbow Curse was in a box, in a store, or maybe it was digitally. I think this was the point where everything was switching over to digital, so I don't... Anyway, that's completely not the point. Box, store, person, buy, money. And they get this. That has no replay value. There's no randomization to this. The only thing you can get from 100% completion are these stupid trophies. They don't even have the value that the Triple Deluxe game did, where it's Kirby collectibles from throughout the entire franchise so you can get a nostalgic kick out of it. They're just trophies from this game that isn't iconic. It's good looking, like, it's colorful, it's interesting to look at. That's kind of the only thing I can say that's 100% in its favor, which is a pathetic compliment to any video game, is that it looks nice. The pathetic compliment that Sonic usually gets is that it sounds nice. That's a better compliment than it looks nice. This is 2014, of course it should look nice. So yeah, if you can't tell already, don't buy it. Don't play it. It's shit. It's a bad Kirby game. I'm surprised at the rarity that I can say that. It's bad. It's not long enough to justify any sort of disc. It's not challenging enough anymore to make it interesting. The plot doesn't exist, so who gives a shit? And the gameplay, it can be well-paced at times, it can be interesting at times. It's not good enough to hinge this entire game on. It's not. Like, it doesn't evolve, it doesn't turn into different things. You can build some different challenges around it by some shrewd level design, but who gives a shit? Okay, you don't get different sorts of gameplay, it's all the same thing that has to be reinterpreted. This game does one thing. This game does one thing, and that one thing is not that good. You know, it's very unfortunate at the end of its life, the end of the Kirby series is when HAL decided to just start shitting the bed. Because this and Triple Deluxe makes me real cautious about what Robobot is going to end up being. I don't even know if Robobot is going to get a video, because I can't shit talk it. I think it's just going to be a regular Kirby game. I don't know. I guess we'll see. Thanks for joining me here on our first, talking about stuff or whatever I decided to call this series, because this is what it is now. I didn't write any notes about this. This is all off the cuff, and it sounds like this. I hope that you guys appreciated my angry energy, I guess. My unscripted wrath. My laughter that's completely going through the floor of the thing I was trying to say. That I was angry, which I'm not, because now I'm just goofily laughing. Anyway, I'll wish you all a victory for gamers. Thanks for watching this video, and, you know, I guess we'll see you next time for whichever Kirby game is going to end up getting a video like this.